The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the busy city streets. I was stuck in traffic, tapping my fingers on the steering wheel, frustrated with the slow crawl of cars ahead of me. The radio played softly, but I wasn't really listening. My mind was wandering, thinking about the plans Sarah and I had for the weekend. She had told me she was going out with friends tonight, so I was planning a quiet evening at home. I glanced around and caught sight of Sarah across the street. She was heading into the lobby of the Grand Rennie Hotel. My brow furrowed in confusion and suspicion. What was she doing there? She said she was going out with friends. I pulled into a side street, parked hastily and grabbed my phone. My hands were shaking as I scrolled to her contact and pressed call. The phone rang. I was about to hang up when the call connected. It was a man's voice, smooth and intimate. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. "Who is this?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Honey, you're not wearing underwear today. That turns me on. Let's not waste any time," the man said, his tone dripping with familiarity. My heart pounded in my chest as I heard Sarah's muffled gasp, followed by, I heard a rustle of fabric and couldn't believe what I was hearing. I hung up, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. I felt angry and betrayed. She lied to me. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. I needed to see this with my own eyes. I started the car and drove around the block. My mind was racing. The Grand Region was a high. The place was ideal for someone trying to hide an affair. I pulled into the car park, my heart pounding. I walked into the lobby, trying to look calm. The receptionist, a young woman with a polite smile, greeted me. "Good evening, sir. How can I help you?" "Good evening. I'm here to meet my wife. She checked in a few minutes ago," I said, forcing a smile. She forgot her phone in the car. I wanted to surprise her. The receptionist hesitated, then nodded. "Of course, sir. Let me just..." She checked for you, tapped on her keyboard, then looked up. "She's in room 812. Would you like me to call her?" "No need," I said quickly. "I'll go surprise her myself." "Thank you." I walked to the elevator, feeling the weight of what I was about to do settle heavily on my shoulders. The ride up was agonizingly slow. Each ding of the floor passed, heightening my anger. When I finally reached the 8th floor, I stepped out into the hallway. My footsteps echoed ominously on the plush carpet. Room 812 was at the end of the hall. I approached it slowly, listening for any sounds from within. I could hear muffled voices, laughter, and the unmistakable tone of intimacy. I was angry, but I forced myself to stay calm. I knocked on the door loudly and authoritatively. There was a moment of silence, followed by hurried whispers. The door opened slightly and a man's face appeared. He was handsome, but his cocky smirk vanished the moment he saw me. He demanded, "Who the hell are you?" I blocked the view inside with my body. "Room service," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm, before he could react. I shoved the door open and stepped inside. Sarah was on the bed wearing nothing but a silk robe. Her eyes were wide with shock. The man, her lover, stood frozen, unsure whether to fight or flee. The room was a mess of discarded clothes and wine glasses. There was a stench of betrayal hanging heavy in the air. "Michael, what are you doing here?" Sarah stammered. Her face paled, catching him red. I said, in a cold, hard voice, "It's time for some consequences." I walked towards the man, who finally seemed to find his voice. "Look, this isn't what it looks like. Save it." I snapped. "I don't care who you are or what your excuses are." I grabbed him by the collar and dragged him to the door. "Get out now." He stumbled, trying to regain his balance. But one look at my face convinced him to leave. Without another word, he turned on his heel and left the room, leaving Sarah and me alone. Sarah tried to speak, but held up a hand to silence her. "Don't just do it," I thought to myself. I took a deep breath and tried to calm my racing mind. "You've made your choices, Sarah. Now it's time for me to make mine." I turned on my heel and walked out, leaving her in stunned silence as the elevator doors closed. I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. I could see the path ahead clearly now, and my revenge had only just begun. "I don't want to hear it," I said. "You've made your choices, Sarah. Now it's time for me to make mine." "Michael, I love you," she said. "It was a mistake. Just a mistake." "It's not a mistake," I said. "It's a betrayal. You lied to me. You lied about everything." She looked down, tears streaming down her face. I could see it in her eyes. I was scared. I thought I could get away with it. I didn't want to lose you. "You've already lost me." I said it quietly, but I meant it. I turned on my heel and walked out. I left her sobbing on the bed as the elevator doors closed. I felt a strange sense of calm. The path ahead was clear. My revenge had only just begun. I just started, so I drove home, my mind racing with thoughts of what to do next. I needed help, someone who could guide me through this mess. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number of my best friend, Jake. "Hey Mike, what's up?" Jake's voice was warm and familiar, instantly calming my nerves. "Jake, I need your help. It's urgent," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What's going on?" he asked, his tone shifting to serious. "It was Sarah. I caught her cheating," I replied, feeling the weight of the words as I said them. "Where are you?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. "I'm at the Grand Regency Hotel," I said. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Jake replied without hesitation. I hung up and headed to the hotel bar. It was dimly lit with soft jazz playing in the background. I ordered a whiskey, needing something strong to steady my nerves. While I was waiting, I thought about Sarah, how we met, and the life we built together. It all felt like a cruel joke now. Jake arrived exactly 20 minutes later, sliding into the seat next to me. He ordered a beer and looked at me, his eyes filled with concern. I told him everything that had happened that evening, from seeing Sarah enter the hotel to the phone call, and finally the confrontation in room 812. Jake listened intently, nodding occasionally. "That's rough," he said when I finished. "But you're doing the right thing by coming to me. We'll figure this out together." I took a sip of my drink, feeling the warmth spread through me. "What do we do first?" Jake leaned in. "We need to gather evidence. If you're planning on a divorce, you'll need proof of her infidelity. And if you want revenge, that's a different story. I want her out of my life, but I also want her to feel the pain she's caused me." Jake nodded. "Right. First, we set up surveillance. I'll have my team follow her and document her activities. We'll find out who this guy is and if there are others. Once we have enough, we can plan our next move. Once we had the evidence, we confronted her, but not just in private. We did it in a way that would have the biggest impact. I said we should be careful not to get into any legal trouble." Hours passed as we finalized the details. By the time I left Jake's office, it was well past midnight. I drove home, my mind buzzing with the plan. The house was dark when I arrived, and I didn't want to wake Sarah, so I came in quietly. I could hear her breathing from our bedroom, and I felt a pang of sadness, but I pushed it aside. She'd made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. The days that followed were a blur of anger and cold, calculated planning. I worked closely with Jake, who set up a team to follow Sarah and gather evidence of her infidelity. I spent many sleepless nights going over photos, videos, and transcripts, each one a blow to my heart but fueling my resolve. One evening, as we sat in his office, the desk cluttered with evidence, Mike said, "We've got enough to bury her." I nodded, feeling the weight of the decision I was about to make. "What's our next move?" Jake leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "We confront her, but not just in private. We'll do it in a way that she'll never forget. It's time for some public humiliation." My jaw tightened. I want her to feel the pain she's caused me. She needs to know what it feels like to be betrayed. Then we need to be smart about this. We don't want any legal trouble. We'll plan it out carefully. Jake replied. His voice was steady and reassuring. A few days later, we had our plan in place. I would confront Sarah. We decided to do it in a public setting somewhere she wouldn't be able to hide. The idea was to catch her off guard and strip away any facade she might try to put up. It was time to play the game, and I intended to win. We chose a busy restaurant, one that Sarah and I used to frequent. It was a place filled with familiar faces, perfect for what I had in mind. I arrived early and took a seat at a table with a clear view of the entrance. I was sitting at the entrance, my heart pounding in my chest. I was feeling a mix of anger, betrayal, and anticipation. Sarah walked in, looking around. She spotted me and hesitated, looking confused. She crossed her face before approaching Michael. "What's going on?" she asked, sitting down across from me. I slid a folder across the table and opened it. She looked at me, her hand shaking slightly as she opened the folder. Her eyes widened as she saw the contents. Photos of her with her lover, timestamps, locations, explicit details. Her face drained of color. "Michael, I can explain," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "No need. Everyone here can see what you've done." I stood up, addressing the restaurant staff and customers. "I apologize for the interruption, but I thought you should all know that my wife Sarah has been cheating on me." Gasps and whispers rippled through the room. Sarah's eyes were filled with tears, her face a mask of horror and shame. She stood up, reaching out to me. "Michael, please let's talk about this." I shook my head. "There's nothing left to talk about. You've made your choices, and now you have to live with them." I turned my back on her. I walked out of the restaurant, feeling a strange sense of calm. The path ahead was clear, and my revenge was only just beginning. As I stepped outside, the cool evening air hid my face. I pulled out my phone and called Jake. "It's done," I said when he answered. "How did it go?" "She's humiliated," Jake replied. "I feel like this is just the beginning," I said, feeling a mix of relief and exhaustion. "Come to my office," Jake said. "We need to discuss the next steps." I drove through the city, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts. The lights blurred around me, and I kept my eyes fixed on the road. When I got to Jake's office, he was waiting for me with a serious look on his face. "Mike, there's more we need to do," Jake said as I sat down. "Sarah's not going to take this lying down. We need to move fast and protect yourself." "Divorce papers?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Jake nodded. "First thing in the morning, we also need to secure any shared assets, bank accounts, and property. Make sure she can't retaliate financially." The next few hours were a blur of activity. Jake and his team helped me draft the divorce papers, ensuring every detail was covered. By the time I left Jake's office, it was well past midnight. I drove home, my mind buzzing with the plan we'd laid out. The house was dark when I arrived. I entered quietly, not wanting to wake Sarah. I could hear her soft breathing from our bedroom. For a moment, a pain of sadness hit me, but I pushed it aside. She had the hours flew by as Jake and his team helped me draft the divorce papers. We made sure to cover every detail. By the time I left Jake's office, it was well past midnight. I drove home, my mind buzzing with the plan we'd laid out. The house was dark when I arrived. I entered quietly, not wanting to wake Sarah. I could hear her soft breathing from our bedroom. For a moment, a pain of sadness hit me, but I pushed it aside. She had made her bed and now she had to lie in it. The next morning, I served Sarah the divorce papers. She looked at me, tears streaming down her face. "Michael, please don't do this." I handed her the envelope. "It's done, Sarah. There's no going back." I walked away, leaving her in stunned silence. I knew that the game had only just begun. I was ready for whatever came next. The morning after serving Sarah the divorce papers, she'd made her bed and now she had to lie in it the next morning. I served Sarah the divorce papers, and she looked at me, tears streaming down her face. "Michael, please don't do this." I felt a strange sense of detachment as I handed her the envelope. "It's done, Sarah. There's no going back." As I walked away, leaving her in stunned silence, I knew that the game had only just begun. I was ready for whatever came next. The morning after serving Sarah the divorce papers, I woke up feeling like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I knew the road ahead would be tough, but I was ready to face it. The first step was to make sure that Sarah couldn't retaliate financially. I met with my lawyer, Miss Peterson, a sharp and no-nonsense woman who had seen her fair share of messy divorces. "Michael, we need to move quickly," she said, her tone brisk and businesslike. "I'll start the process of freezing joint accounts and securing. Your assets have been gathered, and all the financial documents we discussed are in this thick folder." She flipped through the papers, nodding in approval. "Good. This will help us build a strong case. Now, about the house. Are you planning to keep it?" "I don't know yet. There are too many memories, but it's also my son's home. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. For now, let's focus on protecting." I left her office feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. The plan was in motion, but there was still a long way to go. I called Jake to update him. "Jake, it's done. Miss Peterson is handling the financial side," I said as I got into my car. "Great, let's talk about the next steps." Jake replied. "Can you come to my office on your way?" When I arrived, Jake was waiting with a serious expression. "Mike, we need to discuss how to handle the F-from." I figured Sarah would try to spin the story to her advantage. I said, "Let's sit down across from each other. What do we do? We need to control the narrative. That means getting ahead of any rumors she might start. I'll have my team monitor social media and local gossip. We'll make sure the truth is out there." "What about Sarah's lover?" I asked, my voice hardening at the thought of him. "His name is David," Jake said, sliding a "he's not just some random guy. He's been involved in some shady business deals. We can use that to our advantage." I stared at the photo, anger bubbling up inside me. "What do you have in mind?" "We'll dig up dirt on him and use it to discredit both of them. Once we have enough, we can expose him publicly. It will hurt Sarah's credibility even more." I nodded, feeling a sense of grim satisfaction. "Let's do it over the next few days." Jake and his team worked hard to uncover a trail of deceit and corruption linked to David. He had been embezzling money from his company and was under investigation for fraud. It was exactly what we needed. One evening, Jake called me with an update. "Mike, we've got him. David's going down, and Sarah will be dragged down with him." I replied, "Good." I asked, "When do we make our move?" "We'll let the press run with it. By the end of the day, everyone would know who he really was." The next morning, the headlines were ablaze with the scandal. David's face was everywhere, and Sarah's involvement was laid bare for the world to see. The public backlash was immediate and fierce. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was Sarah. I hesitated, then answered. "Michael, please," she pleaded. "You have to stop this. It's ruining my life. You ruined your own life." "Sarah, she replied coldly, "you made your choices, and now you have to live with them. But what about Bruno? Think about our son. He deserves better than this. Better than you." I said, "I'm thinking about him. He deserves better than this. Better than you." My voice was hard. "This is the end, Sarah. There's no going back." I hung up feeling a sense of finality. The plan had worked. Sarah's world was crumbling around her. I knew there would be more challenges ahead, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was in control of my life that evening. I met with Jake to celebrate our victory. We sat in a quiet corner of our favorite bar. The weight of the past few weeks slowly lifted as we talked about new beginnings. Jake said, "To new beginnings," and I echoed, "To new beginnings," as we talked and laughed. I felt a sense of hope. The game was over, and I had won. Now it was time to rebuild and move forward. Days turned into weeks, and then, after the public scandal, I focused on my son Bruno and rebuilding our lives. One evening, as I was helping Bruno with his homework, my phone rang. It was Sarah. "Michael." She said, "Please, we need to talk." Her voice was trembling. "There's nothing left to say," I replied. "Please, just one meeting. I need to explain." She sighed. "Fine. Tomorrow at 3 p.m. Morning." I arrived at the cafe on Elm Street the next day and found a quiet corner. Sarah walked in looking more fragile than I'd ever seen her. She approached cautiously and sat down across from me. "Thank you for meeting me," she began, her voice soft. "Get to the point." "I'm sorry," I said, my patience thin. "I know I've hurt you. You've hurt me deeply, and I can't undo the past. But there's something you need to know." I crossed my arms, waiting for her to continue. "David wasn't just a mistake," she said, her voice cracking. "He manipulated me. He made me feel like you didn't care, like you were too busy for me. I was weak, and I fell for it. But there's more. He threatened me." My eyes narrowed. "He threatened you." "He said that if I didn't stay with him, he would ruin our family. He knew things about you and your work." I was scared, Michael. I didn't know what to do. I felt a surge of anger mixed with a strange sense of understanding. "Why didn't you come to me, Sarah? We could have faced it together." I was ashamed. Then, when you confronted us at the hotel, I realized how far. I was at a loss. I wanted to fix things, but I didn't know how. I took a deep breath, trying to process her words. "Sarah, you betrayed me. You broke our family, but I can't deny that David is a dangerous man. Why are you telling me this now?" "I want to make things right," she said, pleading. "I want to help you take him down. I have proof of his illegal activities. Jake's team might not have found this stuff." I leaned back, thinking. She offered to help. I nodded. I owed it to Bruno and to myself. I said, "All right." I took the USB drive. She handed it to me. "Everything you need is on there." I nodded. "Give me the proof." She handed it to me. "We'll take it from there." I took the drive, feeling its weight in my hand. "This doesn't fix what you did, Sarah, but it's a start." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand. Thank you for giving me this chance." I stood up, looking down at her for Bruno's sake. "I'll try, but don't expect forgiveness overnight." As I walked out of the cafe, I felt a strange mix of relief and Sarah's confession added another layer to the mess, but it also offered a way to finally put an end to David's manipulations that evening. I met with Jake at his office. He looked up as I entered, noticing the serious expression on my face. "What's going on, Mike?" he asked. Sarah came to me with a confession. I said, placing the USB drive on his desk. David's been manipulating and threatening her, and she wants to help us take him down. This drive has proof of his illegal activities." Jake picked it up, raising eyebrows. "Do you believe her?" "I think she's telling the truth." I replied that she seems sincere, and if there's even a chance we can finally nail David, we need to take it. Jake nodded, plugging the drive into his computer. "Let's see what we've got." We spent the next few hours going through the files. They contained detailed records of David's illegal dealings, bank transfers, and even communications with other criminals. It was a goldmine of evidence. "This is enough to bury him," Jake said, a grim smile spreading across his face. "We can take this to the authorities and ensure he never sees the light of day again." "Good," I said, feeling a sense of closure. "Let's do it." The next morning, armed with the evidence, Jake and I met with the authorities, who were shocked by the extent of David's crimes and assured us that they would take immediate action as we left the meeting. Jake turned to me and said, "You did the right thing, Mike. This will finally put an end to all of this." I nodded, feeling the weight lift off my shoulders. "I hope so, for Bruno's sake. I need to move on from this." That evening, I sat down with Bruno and felt a sense of peace for the first time in months. "Hey buddy, how about we go to the park this weekend?" Bruno's face lit up. "Dad, that sounds awesome." "Yeah, I think it's time we start having some fun again." Ruffling his hair as I looked at my son, I realized that despite everything, we still had each other, and that was enough to start rebuilding our lives.